And now we will tackle the second half, which will tackle 2 episodes. Funnily enough, we asked the question in favor of a certain candy apple. Is candy considered food? Loxton posed the idea that food is food when it is edible, or anything fit for consumption. Luckily, Applin's apple isn't the Pokemon, so we can munch away. Though that raises another question. How do typical food examples exist when they didn't before? Is the unnamed dragon apple a kind of oversized lepaberry? Because remember, all crab apples are just undergrown regular apples botanically. But where would these other kinds of apples come from? Well, now we know that all apples stem from Kazakhstan. So let's have a look at the type of apples in Pokemon. Originally, the apples you could get were version exclusive. The sweet apple, once exclusive to Shield, would reflect apples like Fuji, Gala, and Honeycrisp. The tart apple, that was exclusive to Sword, reflects apples like Golden Delicious, Pink Lady, and the Granny Smith. Apples tend to vary in their pH level, generally falling between 3.3 and 4. Sweeter apples tend to fall on the more acidic part of the gauge, which makes it all the more perfect that the one with the sweet apple gets the move Apple Acid, as the higher acidic apple gets the move that would be the product of malic acid, citric acid, and ascorbic acid. Remember those from the lime? Malic acid was the sole organic acid that determines an apple's overall acidity. The genetics of an apple use the gene called Ma. Ma for high acid, Ma for balance, and Ma for low acid. However, the Ma gene tends to be the more dominant, making a sweet apple more common overall. Then in Kitakami, another apple was thrown into the mix, the candy apple or syrupy apple, which doesn't require a specific apple for its coating. People can use a tart apple Granny Smith from Australia in 1868, or the delightful Fuji from Fujisaki, Japan in the late 1930s, and marketed in 1962. The Jazz Apple, which is a cross between a Royal Gala and a Brayburn, developed in 1985, the year I was freaking born, from New Zealand, and the Gala, which also came from New Zealand in the 1930s. That would mean, based on where Kitakami takes place, Japan, the beloved Fuji would be the syrupy apple of choice. I'm freaking shocked the Loxton didn't delve into any of this. All he did was say Applin was what he referred to as a worm living in an apple, and for some reason debuted in Great Britain. We'll get there. Fun fact, in Galar, giving a person an Applin is an effective way to confess one's feelings of love and ask them out. And this Pokemon evolves into Flapple, Appletun, or Dipplin. One could argue that each form of Applin represents a kind of apple. Flapple for snacking, Appletun for baking, and Dipplin for tasting. Oh, and this came from Loxton's comment section. Appletun, while containing the word tun, meaning an enclosure or house, is also an allusion to the term appletun, which means orchard in Old English. What I find most amusing that in the world of Pokemon, for the housing of Applin, there's no future in tender apples. Since tender apples fall apart so easily, they wouldn't withstand any application in Applin's overall gimmick. If Applin runs out of apples to eat, or if it is separated from its apple, its body will lose moisture, and it will become dehydrated and weak. As it grows by eating the flesh of the apple, Applin uses its own body fluid to strengthen the apple's skin and prevent it from rotting. Its body fluid counteracts the innate gene that causes the apple to degenerate. All apples need to be firm for every form, as only a firm apple will be able to withstand theoretical flight. Only a firm apple would withstand baking. and only firm apples would be best to be encased in red cinnamon syrup.